Okay, this is science for Wednesday, January 6th. We're going to be starting on page 211 in our books. So turn to page 211 so you can read along with me. Pause the video if you need to while you find page 211. And then we'll review for the quiz and the test that we'll be taking next week once we're back from distance learning. Okay, terms to remember. Prairie, a flat grassland of North America. Grassland, a large open area of grasses used by grazing animals. Grazer, an animal that depends on grasses for food. Rodent, a small mammal such as a mouse. Water source, where animals find drinking water. All right? Remember, we've been talking about habitats. We learned that for a habitat, animals need space, shelter, water, and food. And yesterday we were talking about a food chain, and a food chain consists of producers, which are your plants, because plants produce their own food. Consumers, which is anything that eats another thing, like a plant or another animal. So there's your consumers that eat. Consume means to eat something. And your top predator, which was the one that doesn't usually get eaten by other animals. And then your decomposers, which break down the dead things. Okay? All right, so we're going to talk about a specific habitat, and these are land habitats. And the first land habitat we're going to talk about is the prairie. If we were to travel the world, we could find a variety of habitats. Because there are different climates, we would find dry habitats and wet habitats. Some habitats are very cold, while others are very hot. Habitats come in all sizes. Even a leaf could be a habitat for a microscopic creature or a tiny insect. We will learn about some very large habitats. The prairie. A prairie is a flat grassland. Grasslands have more grasses than any other kind of plant, so they are large and open. There are very few trees or larger plants. You might have learned about the grasslands of the African savanna with its lions, giraffes, and zebras. However, you will find very different animals on the Great Plains of North America. So this is a grassland in North America that they're talking about. Turn the page. The prairies of North America are in a temperate climate. That means the weather is not too hot or too cold. Most of the prairie has 4 seasons. God's plan for space and shelter on the prairie. At first glance, the open prairie seems like a poor place to find shelter, but God has given the animals living there instincts that help them find places to live. Some animals migrate from place to find food or have babies. Other animals burrow underground to make homes or hide in the tall prairie grasses. A prairie has many grazers, or animals that depend on grasses for food. Do you remember what we call animals that eat only plants? Grazers are herbivores. Some grazers of the prairie are cattle, horses, and bison. A long time ago, a great many bison roamed the prairie. You might remember bison by another name. They are called buffalo. Grazers, such as bison, travel in herds for protection. Large grazers are very important to grassland habitats. Top of the next page. And by the way, those are bison or buffalo in that picture there. As they roam, their hooves not only press plant seeds into the soil so that the seeds can grow, but also break up the soil so that it can absorb more rainwater. Grazing animals also help the prairie by cutting the grass with their teeth. This helps the grass plants to grow stronger and gives the roots a chance to make new soil. Pollinators, such as butterflies and bees, help the prairie as well. Each grass plant has tiny flowers. Pollinators help the grasses make new seeds. This causes the prairie to grow again each spring. A grouse is sometimes called a prairie chicken. Its coloring helps it to blend in with the prairie grasses. Where do you think this bird makes its nest? Right, so when we were talking about birds, we said that birds were brightly colored, usually had nests in Trees and birds that were dull in color so they would camouflage had nests on the ground, right? Prairie dogs are actually rodents of the American prairies. Rodents are small mammals like rats, mice, and beavers. These rodents burrow under the prairie. Prairie dogs make underground burrows that connect with other prairie dog homes. These burrows are called prairie dog towns. They can stretch out for miles. And there you see a picture of a prairie dog town. You can see one sticking his head out, or actually his whole, well, one sticking his head out and one standing up completely, right there in the front of the picture. Read the Bible verse with me. He causeth the grass to grow for the cattle and her herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth. Psalm 104:14. Turn the page. All right, so that was space and shelter. Now we're going to do food and water on the prairie. God's plan for food and water on the prairie. Grasshoppers, locusts, and other insects are an important part of the prairie food chain. Birds, amphibians, reptiles, and small mammals all depend on them for food. Too many locusts could eat all the prairie grasses and other producers. That is why God created the animals that eat them. Prairie dogs and other small animals of the prairie eat insects, grass, and other plants. Prairie dogs are an important part of many food chains on the prairie. They are the main food source for many predators such as falcons, eagles, coyotes, badgers, and ferrets. Prairie dogs protect each other from predators by standing on their hind legs and sounding a sharp bark. All right, so that's how they get their name, prairie dogs, because they bark to warn each other. All right, so you see locusts up there at the top of the picture, and then you see prairie dogs, a whole group of them down at the bottom, and on the next page, a coyote. A coyote is a top predator of the prairie. It usually hunts small animals but can sometimes hunt larger ones such as deer. Because the coyote is a top predator, its job is important. It helps keep the prairie balanced and healthy by eating extra mice and other small rodents. Hawks also hunt rodents. Too many rodents can spread disease. The prairie king snake is another important part of the prairie food chain. It eats rodents and other snakes. Land animals need a water source. Rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds all provide fresh water for prairie animals. Do you remember how the water cycle and water runoff keep these water sources fresh? Fresh water is what land animals drink. All right, so remember the water cycle where water is evaporating and then it rises and then it condenses into a cloud when it cools and then it reaches cooler again, causing rain to fall back into the water sources on the earth. All right, turn the page to 216. Look at these prairie animals and classify them. So they are either an invertebrate or a vertebrate, and then underneath vertebrate you need to tell me if it's a mammal, a bird, a fish, a reptile, or an amphibian. All right, the first one they show you is a hawk. That would be a bird. And they show you a king snake. That would be a reptile. Okay, it is a reptile. Snakes, lizards, turtles, crocodiles, and alligators are all reptiles. Prairie dog. That's a mammal. Buffalo. Another mammal. What about that monarch butterfly there? That would be an invertebrate. Remember that invertebrate? The biggest group of invertebrates is insects. So a butterfly is an insect. Rabbit. That's a mammal. The pronghorn. Another mammal. What about that prairie chicken? That's a bird. A toad. An amphibian. Frogs, toads, and salamanders are your amphibians. Coyote. That's a mammal. And last of all, that locust. That's an invertebrate. All right. Fill in the blank. A blank is a flat grassland in North America. Prairie. That was the habitat we were learning about today. A blank is an animal that depends on grasses for food. We call them a grazer. They are a herbivore. We call them a grazer. If they eat grasses, they're a grazer. Prairie dogs are blanks, which are small mammals of the prairie. Rodents, like your mice and your rats. Prairie dogs are rodents. Land animals use rivers, streams, lakes, or ponds as a blank source. Water source. Water source. All right, let's review for the test. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is pick up the charts. You will need to know both these charts for both the quiz and the test. For both of them, you only will need to label the main body parts. So that would be your head, your thorax, and your abdomen. That's all you need to know. First, that's your head. In the middle is your thorax. That's where your wings and legs are attached. And the last part is your abdomen. Okay? Then you will need to know the stages of complete metamorphosis. So number 1 would be egg. It starts out as an egg. Number 2 would be larva. That's your caterpillar. Egg, larva, pupa. That's the resting stage, either a chrysalis or cocoon. And last would be adult, which is your butterfly or your moth. In this case, it's a butterfly, but it could be a moth if it was a cocoon instead of a chrysalis. All right, so you will need to know that for both the quiz and the test. All right, I'm going to ask you some questions. What do you call animals without a backbone? Invertebrates. Invertebrates are the animals without a backbone. Vertebrates are the animals with a backbone. And the vertebrates are your mammals, your fish, your birds, your reptiles, and your amphibians. These have bills or beaks. Birds. These are the breathing holes of an insect. They're found on the abdomen. Those are your spiracles. Spiracles, the breathing holes of an insect. These are many eyes that work together as one eye, like you would find on an insect. Compound eye. Compound eye. What is it to look like another animal for protection? Mimicry. Mimicry. What do you call an insect's feelers that are used to smell, hear, and taste? Antenna. Antenna. And what's the deepest part of the ocean? Abyss. Abyss. And what is the biggest group of invertebrates? Insects. All right. Animals that are hunted by other animals for food. Those are prey. Animals that hunt other animals for food. That would be predator. That would be predator. The largest group of invertebrates. I already asked you that, but it's going to be on the quiz, it's going to be on the test. The largest group of invertebrates, that's animals without a backbone. Insects. How many legs do insects have? 6. How many body parts do insects have? 3. Head, thorax, abdomen. How many legs do spiders have? 8. How many body parts do spiders have? Just 2. The head and the abdomen. That's all they have. God gives animals this, which help them to know how to survive. Instincts. Instincts. What's an animal that eats both meat and plants? Omnivore. What's an animal that eats only plants? Herbivore. And what's an animal that eats only meat? Carnivore. What is the part of the insect that contains the brain? The head. Just like your brain is in your head, an insect's brain is in its head. Mammals breathe with what? Lungs. You are a mammal. You have lungs. That's what you breathe air with. What's the ability to blend in with the surroundings? That would be camouflage. Okay? When an animal looks like another animal for protection, that's mimicry. But when your animal blends in with the surroundings, that's camouflage. What are the tiny holes an insect uses to breathe? Spiracles. Again, it's on the quiz, it's on the test. You need to know for both. When an animal's body temperature changes with the surrounding temperature, we say that that animal is cold-blooded. When your body temperature changes, like you go outside where it's cold and your body temperature changes, you're cold-blooded. Warm-blooded, like we are, we stay the same no matter what. Okay, our body temperature stays the same. Okay, unless we have a fever and then it rises because our body's trying to fight off infection, but our body temperature stays the same, so that's warm-blooded. To divide into groups. Classify, like we divide animals into vertebrates and invertebrates, and then we take the vertebrates and classify them into groups of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians. That's classify, to divide into groups. Insect feelers that are used to smell, hear, and taste. Antenna. Antenna. A tunnel an animal digs for shelter. That would be burrow. The part of an animal's body that's used for grasping, feeling, or moving. Tentacles. Like an octopus or a squid, they can grasp something, they can feel something, and they can move with their tentacles. A poison that some animals give by a bite or sting. Venom. The bones that form the framework of the body. Right, so think about all the animals that have a backbone. That's not the only bone they have. You got bones everywhere, and that makes up your skeleton. The bones that make the framework of the body is the skeleton. All right. Tell me what animal I'm talking about. And I don't mean a specific animal. I mean a group of animals. So that would be your invertebrates or the vertebrates, mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, amphibians. Which one is warm-blooded and has at least some hair? Mammals. Very good. Which one is cold-blooded and has no backbone? That would be your invertebrates. That no backbone should make you think invertebrates. This one lays eggs and has bills or beak. Birds. This one has fins and gills. Fish. This one breathes with gills and some with lungs. That would be your amphibians, the ones that change. Remember, tadpoles change into frogs. When they're tadpoles, they breathe with gills. When they change into frogs, they breathe with lungs. This one makes milk for their babies and take good care of their young. That would be mammal. This is warm-blooded and it has feathers and wings. That would be your birds. This one's cold-blooded and covered with dry scales. Dry scales should make you think of reptiles. This one has smooth, moist skin. Smooth, moist skin. That should make you think of amphibians. Very good. All right, tomorrow we will be doing another worksheet with our science as well as reviewing for the test. So we'll be doing that worksheet 9, I think it is. All right, so see you next for history.